this afternoon. Perhaps, yeah, Ola, thanks for starting that. And then there's a sort of less technical track tomorrow, same time, I believe, I think another 3 hours, more focused on analysts and so on. That one today's more about people who are a little bit more technical. So hopefully you've got some sort of hands-on technical experience. I haven't got a slide that introduces myself, but my name's Rick Smithies, working with the Accumulus colleagues. I'm over in the UK today, this afternoon. Very hot day today here for once. So welcome. I won't go around the rest of the team, but we've got Rita and Mike. You can see the names there. And we've got Rob Howsam, who's going to be helping out with today. And people on the Accumulus side can just chip in and say hi, I'm sure, as the day goes by. So let's get underway a little bit. Let's see if I can make my slide move forwards. Doesn't want to move forward. There we go. So yeah, it's all about using FHIR data for our CMC, you know, chemistry, manufacturing controls, drug data, drug infrastructure data. And as I mentioned today, we're hoping that you're a little bit technical. You probably at least know what XML and JSON are. You know, maybe you're familiar with databases, servers, REST APIs, hopefully. This is our web-based modern ways of accessing data. I'll say at this point, it's a broad range. Hopefully you'll get something out of today, whatever. Maybe some of it's a bit over your head. Maybe some of it seems very simple. We don't really know your level of expertise, or at least I don't. So, you know, keep the questions coming. We're going to do a long series of exercises, some of it over to you, some of it I'll be guiding you through, a bit of both, and we'll sort of play that by ear a little bit. And I think there'll be something for everybody. So hopefully you're familiar with data and, you know, editing chunks of XML, or if not, you can have a go for the first time perhaps. And we're going to be sending data to our test server. And you know, if you know something about drug manufacturing and so on, that will certainly be useful. So there's a hands-on that's not these slides, but a sort of more of a Word document with step-by-step instructions. I'll give you the link to that in a moment. I don't think you'll have seen that yet. And yeah, so I stress the idea here is that you'll be doing most of the work. I mean, I could just talk the way through it for 3 hours, but I think it's going to be more valuable for you if you know, at some points I stop demoing, hand it over to you. You can try these things for real, because as soon as you try these things for real, that's where you hit the less obvious problems almost straight away, and you come back and ask questions. And maybe we'll hand over to some of you to show your screens if you get stuck or you achieve something. If people feel like doing that, then we can keep it nice and interactive. So a bit of an agenda, 10 minutes, perhaps a little bit longer. This is this bit, just going to tell us what we're going to do about the day, and then that will sort of merge into talking a bit about the server, and then again it'll kind of merge into the actual hands-on activities really. So we'll get into that fairly soon. Do perhaps a couple of hours of hands-on, depending on how it goes, with a little gap in the middle just to give us all a bit of a leg stretch. But other than that, the bulk of the day will be me going through some steps, suggesting that you have a go, giving you a chance to do it. You can come back and let me know how it goes. Some people will probably go fast, some people will go slow, some people I'm sure will just sit and watch, but I encourage you to be hands-on if you can. We're not going to be too you know, prescriptive about the steps or what we do in each thing. Well, I think we're just going to have to sort of discover how the day works to some extent. And then the last half hour, a bit more open discussion. As I say, we'll take questions as we go along. I think that's very important. You know, specific questions about, you know, I'm stuck on X, or, you know, what are we doing with this stuff kind of questions as well. But perhaps we'll keep the big discussions towards the end, and then we'll have a bit of a wrap up, and away we go. So the slides, the activities and the server itself are going to be available for a couple of weeks after this. So you don't have to get through everything today by any means. So don't worry about that. And you'll be able to ask questions of us, you know, after the day, and things that only just come into your mind later. So, as I say, good if you know something about XML and/or JSON, REST, and web-based data. I'll probably tell you what that is at some point during the day if you don't already know. And if you know a bit about FHIR already, that's great. We're not really assuming you know much about FHIR. The last event a few months ago now was recorded, so if you, hopefully you're either at that or you've had a chance to look at that. If not, I couldn't find the link just when I was putting this slide together, but it's around somewhere. That goes into a bit more of an introduction of FHIR. And by the way, let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow, or you just can't hear me properly or whatever. So we're going to try and learn what the basic FHIR resources are for this domain and how they connect together, because FHIR is a series of small building blocks that fit together and make a big picture. You can't do very much with one FHIR resource. They're like your sort of Lego bricks. You put together different types of things to build an impressive thing. So we have our guided exercises. It'd be a mixture of me telling you what to do and you. Oh, thanks Rita for the chat link there. But don't all rush off at once. That's really handy though. And yeah, so it'll be a mixture of me talking, you listening, it going a bit quiet while you get on with it, and people asking things and so on. We're going to be doing a series of processes where you get a chunk of data and load it to the server. And then there's a tool we can use for displaying it back, or you can, I've even thought it might be nice if we can look at each other's data. You know, somebody loads a resource onto the server, and the whole point of this is data exchange. You know, we're not just putting data on servers for fun. We're putting data on servers so that other people can share that data. The server is a communication platform. So yeah, if people encourage people to send a link to something they've uploaded and other people can download it, maybe they can edit it, maybe they can re-upload it, that kind of thing. That's what sometimes goes on at these kind of hack days. Yeah, it's not a secure server, it's just a test server. I mean, nobody else should be using it today, but in theory, anybody could see it. So don't put your credit card number in there, and don't put anything sensitive in there, of course. So I don't know if this link will be clickable for you. I bet it isn't. So if I can find a way of copying that without it changing the slide, I'll drop that in the chat right now. Where's the chat? There's the chat. So that's kind of like the root of it. In fact, let's just go there now. It looks something like this. And well, I'll just go back a step. If I go back to this sort of higher level thing here, that is the place where all the our kind of implementation guide is for this stuff. Now it's not very easy to see because it's in, this is the sort of source for it rather than the real kind of viewable part. But let me just go back to our little repository we've got today. So we're going to be looking at this testing event 2023 10th of August. That's the page you'll land on with that link. But then if you go into there, you'll see these. Well, you see the word-based instructions, which are that, not the overview, but the testing event day 2, and the sample data is in here, and you'll see 20 or so resources in pairs. So you've got a JSON and XML pair for each, and with a series of things like ingredients, medications, and so on. And which of those you use will become apparent as we go through. A lot of this has been put together recently. I'm sure in there somewhere there's a typo or a bug or something that's in the wrong file. So, yeah. But discovering that will be half the fun, I'm sure. So yeah, there's a direct link there, but I guess that won't be very easy to follow for you. So I will put that direct. No, I won't put that direct link in the chat. I will take it from here and put it in the chat. That is the direct link for the instructions, and the chat window is there. Okay, so that should give you enough to go on. Okay, so a bit more overview. Yeah, we're going to have those step-by-step instructions. It's a long format Word document of about a dozen pages. I've got a print off in front of me. So something to dig through over the first, these couple of hours. But we're not, I sort of stress, we're not just thinking that you should get through all 10 steps of this today. If you get through the first couple of steps and you've learned something, that's great. If you race through and get to step 10 in half an hour because you know all this stuff, that's also good. But you'll probably learn less than the people who are starting out. So we have our resources. Our FHIR resources are our chunks of data. And some of them are in those files you just saw in that repository, and also they're on the server. Some of them are on the server, and you'll be putting some more of them on the server. We've got XML, we've got JSON, take your pick. You can mix and match if you like. And yeah, if you want to unmute and ask questions as we go along through this, or use the chat, say, you know, I'm stuck on this, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, ask questions as mentioned. Yeah, just to stress this again, you know, this is a bit of a learning experience for all of us. I try to fill the exercises with a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff to read, just so that most people won't like finish it in 5 minutes. But equally, I realise we may well not get through all of it today. So, you know, I think that's okay. Yeah, so no pressure, etc., etc. The server will be around for at least a couple of weeks. And no guarantees it'll be around for longer, but similar servers are around anyway, so you can use more or less any. You know, we're using a sort of vanilla FHIR server for this. There's nothing particularly special about our server that you'll see today that isn't on every other FHIR server in the world, and that's kind of part of the point of FHIR, is that, you know, your FHIR and my FHIR, it's all the same. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to use it to interoperate. So hopefully you'll have seen a document come out last week saying that we're going to be using Postman for this, and hopefully most of you are familiar with Postman or something similar. It's a well, it's not a web-based tool. It has a web-based version, but it's a downloadable tool that lets you talk to web servers like a sort of super version of a browser. So with a browser, you know, Chrome or whatever, you can look at web data, but you can't really send web data. With Postman, you can send and receive data. So I'm hoping most of you are kind of have a passing familiarity with that or some other tool, because to be honest, it can be a little bit idiosyncratic and hard to learn. The first half hour of use of it, you'll probably struggle. I certainly did. It's not the most user-friendly thing, but it's kind of the industry standard tool, and it's good once you know about it. I'll be demoing it, so you'll have that. And if you get stuck, of course, ask. Yeah, if you've not downloaded it, please do. And if you've not got admin rights on your computer, you might struggle a bit, but there you go. Other tools are fine. You'll need some sort of editor. I use this thing called Oxygen. It's a sort of mainly XML and partly JSON editor, but it's not free, although there is a free trial. Hopefully you've got something. Visual Studio Code is getting more and more popular. Things like Word don't really work. If you're really stuck, Notepad can be used for opening and looking at these files. Even if you don't plan to edit the files or don't plan to post them, you can load them up and have a look at them. Notepad would be fine for that. Notepad++ is free and very good, says Dan. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it's a good choice. Right, so going back away from the day itself for a bit, and before we get to the hands-on, some background about our FHIR data and this sort of area. So this diagram, I think Rita put this together, shows some of the topics that, you know, are in our domains, many domains. So identification of drugs, impurities, batch analysis, and so on, stability studies, all the things that you need in your sort of PQ and CMC domains that going down into different impurities, different sites. So a lot of, you know, it's like an overview of concepts that you should kind of be familiar with, I guess. And what we've been doing over the last year or so in Accumulus is mapping these things onto the FHIR interoperability standard. You know, FHIR existed, well, it's been going about 10 years now, FHIR, and mostly in the patient centric direct care world, it has to be said. But the last few years, it's definitely been moving into the sort of, well, not the background, but in the kind of away from the patient facing world into the sort of drug definition, drug manufacturing, drug regulation world. And we've been mapping these concepts onto FHIR data models to let us represent these concepts in shareable chunks of data. So there's a sort of high level model to model mapping here, which and there's going to be much more of this type of level of discussion and chat on tomorrow's. This is a slide from tomorrow's session, in fact. But we've grouped the logical areas, you know, stability study, manufacturing, specification being a few, and we've come up with FHIR shaped models for them. And maybe you can even see here that there's similarities. We're using the same colored pieces in a slightly different order to give that commonality. So I'll zoom into one of them, the I think it's the stability study. So that's quite a big diagram to sort of throw at you if you've not seen it before, but you can start to see some familiar pieces. So, right, this is the drug. It's got a complicated FHIR name, medicinal product definition, but that's what we call it in FHIR. It is a medicinal product, and it's a type of one, and it's a defining set of characteristics for one. And as you know, drugs have ingredients, and ingredients are made of substances. And then when we actually talk about drugs, we're not talking about the Wikipedia version of the drug or the definition of the drug. We're talking about individual scoops and bottles and so on of drugs. So we have, batch 1 of the drug, batch 2 of the drug, and batch 99 of the drug. So we have a sort of slight shift between the defining world of the drug and the definition of how it should be, and then how an individual batch of it is, and who made it, and when it was made, and so on. So there's a little bit of a mind shift there. And then we move into the greener bits where we're starting to run tests on drugs. So, all about, what this is all about is quality and checking that things are okay. So you have a batch of a drug and you run 20 tests on it. You check the pH, you check the color of it, you check the density, you check a whole load of things, you run it through a mass spectrometer, whatever you might do. You come up with a defined set of tests, and then you come up with a conclusion, which is another FHIR resource. So all these rounded boxes are individual FHIR resources. Some are mentioned more than once just to show that they repeat. And then, so we have this axis of the product, the batches, and the tests, and the conclusion. And then over on the left-hand side, we have the concept of the plan for the test. It's like, what am I supposed to do with this test? Do I just test the pH? Do I just test it once? Do I test it every week? Do I test it 5 times and take the average? That sort of thing, we use these observation definitions for. So we've got observations and observation definitions that say, this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is what I actually did today. And that test went wrong, so I did it again, and it worked the second time, and so on. And I use, this machine to do it, and so on and so forth. And then we have some grouping. We have a plan definition resource, which is the series of steps that make up this study. So we do things at 3 months. My mouse has disappeared. At 3 months, and it's this test at 3 months, and then at 6 months we do this other test, and so on and so forth. So quite a lot to take in. There's a slightly simpler slide next. If you look at all the colours and shapes, this one is kind of a simplified view of the same thing. We've got our axis here, the product, the ingredients of the product, which possibly surprisingly are in a different resource, but FHIR is quite chunk oriented, because you might want to reuse ingredients, or you might want to add multiple ingredients to a product without changing this thing all the time. And then we say, well, this ingredient is actually a case of stelbatalol, but it's at 3 milligrams per tablet, and another one might be 5 milligrams per tablet. So the substance is connected to the product by a sort of intermediate thing that tells you the strength, tells you whether it's an active ingredient, tells you whether it's an excipient, and so on. One thing that wasn't on the previous slide is organizations. So you can say, this company A is the manufacturer of this company B is the manufacturer of that. That would be 2 of these guys. It wouldn't be one that's A and B. It would be 2 separate ones. So this is our kind of definitional strata, if you like. And then down here, in fact, I've got some little boxes here. Let's make those appear. There we go. And down here, we've got, as I say, an actual batch of things, and an actual test that is done, and an actual result that's done from it. So that's a sort of different strata, if you like. It's all data on the server, but different sort of uses. These are definitely a long-lived thing that sits on the server forever, perhaps prepared in advance, and then batches come along every week or every month for the next 20 years. Observations are done on a regular basis, and reports are done as often as you like. And then down here, we've got something in the middle, which is sort of semi-static. The stability study is a registered plan. You've probably verified it with the FDA or somebody to say, this is what we're going to do, and we have to do this, and we run it once a year or once every 2 weeks or whatever it is. And that defines the things that happen over here. So we're going to be seeing all of these resources today. In not in order of importance, but you don't get very far without a medicinal product definition. That's kind of resource number one. We talk about organization second, I think, because it's fairly easy to grasp, then ingredient, substance, and so on through all the steps. And finally, if we get that far, and we may well not do, we might talk about plans and observation definitions. Okay, so that is beginning of the intro. Let's get to our actual hands-on. Now, a good time to take questions. I'll have a slight pause if anybody wants to ask anything. We'll close that slide and bring up this. So what I might do straight away is give you this is the URL of the server and of a good first product. So if you know what to do with the server, you can go there, you can just click on it, and you will see something. But I put that in the chat, by the way. You'll see some FHIR data. So this is our server. That part is the server address, and I'll explain a bit more about what that means in a moment. And this is our resource name mentioned in the previous slide, medicinal product definition, and this is the a particular one of them with this name. And you can see some JSON data here down here. So let's go back to our instructions and have a bit of a read through. So I'm going to be treating this as a bit of a script. You can sort of read along. It's a bit too verbose for slides, but you can imagine it as slides which I'm just sort of speaking to. So preparation here. Hopefully you've all found this document. Nothing I haven't said before. You need a REST client, ideally Postman. And then this, again, it recaps what I've kind of just said, really. But for those reading the document who weren't listening to that before, it just says we're going to put some data up. We're going to put some data up by hand, of course. And the idea of this is not to handcraft data onto a server, of course, because that's not how things would really happen. But every time you take some XML from somewhere, from a folder, change it to put your drug name in and put it onto a server, you're sharing data. And you can imagine that the process of getting the XML could be done by a software extraction from a database. And then the XML could be edited, not by hand, but it would already have your data in it, your company name, your drug name. And then you would send that not using Postman, but using some software that works like Postman, which kind of all software does these days, and send some data to a web server. So the things we're doing by hand today are meant to illustrate doing things for real. When we have real structured data in our CMC systems, we'll be able to exchange this data in XML or JSON the way we're doing it by hand today, without having to send PDF documents, Word documents, type things, cut and paste things from Excel repeatedly. We're going to do a sort of database to database thing in the future. That's the goal. So the first 3 steps are sort of intro. That'll be more about me talking, and then I'm going to stop at some points, I promise, and let you get hands on. And then we're going to go through the different resources, medicinal product definition, MPD, I might call it for short, medicinal product definition, step 2 and 3, manufacturer 4 and 5, ingredient 6, and so on, a batch in 7, and there's about 10 steps in the whole thing. And again, I may not get through it all, you might not get through it all. Let's not worry too much. So at this point, although I'm talking a lot and I'm going to be demoing it on the screen, I encourage you, if you can listen and play at the same time, to start clicking on some of these links. So that link here that I just put in the chat, if I went to that, it gives me this. It gives me this JSON here, and you can sort of have a look at it and see if it makes any sense to you. You can see a resource name. We're a bit small on my screen. Let's make it a bit bigger. You can see an ID, some sort of metadata with dates and so on. But you can start to see things like familiar things like, oh, okay, gastro-resistant tablet, that kind of makes sense. Oral use, a name, and so on, and some bits that might look sort of familiar, and then something about some kind of manufacturer or manufacturing. So that's raw data coming from a web server. Web servers, FHIR data is web servers. That's what FHIR database is. FHIR servers are web-enabled databases. This is our REST thing. Remember that acronym from before, REST, REST? Hopefully some of you know that. It's about exposing our databases via the web, a bit like intranets for data. Not the public web, of course, it's still password protected and totally secure, but using the web technology. So web servers using HTTP, but instead of getting web pages of HTML, we're serving up pages of JSON or XML. Yeah, if I go to I'm on the same server, the same page, but if I click on that link, you'll see the same data in XML, which may be more or less familiar with you, depending on how long you've been doing this. I'm still a bit of an old school XML guy, I have to say. But the world is moving towards JSON, there's no doubt about it. Yeah, so if you click on that link there, you will have seen the XML, and this is a little bit of an aside, but something that I personally find interesting. You're seeing data. Let's put them side by side for fun. If I put that there, I didn't want to do it. If I put that there, is that going to do it? And I put that. Is it going to do it? There. Yeah, it did do it. No, it didn't do it. Didn't do it at all. Okay. Well, I'll sort of fudge it a bit. Here you can see the same server address. Well, that's a bit hidden, but you can see this is the same resource in two different formats. So medicinal product definition on the left here, medicinal product definition on the right here in JSON. It's exactly the same ID. All of these things are line by line identical, and yet it's a different format. Yeah, so it's the same server, same data, different format. That's one of the kind of key things about REST. You can get the data from the server in format A, format B, format C, whatever. So that leads us to think, well, what format is it really in? You know, are we storing it in JSON and converting it to XML? Are we storing it in both? Because that would be crazy, right? You don't want to store data twice. That's a recipe for disaster. So so it leads us to think about how this is really stored. And the answer is it's probably not stored in either format. It's probably stored in some sort of relational database format. Yeah, and people already have relational databases. They don't have FHIR, but we do have some data in relational databases, maybe more than one. And you start to see that the data as it's stored and the data as it's extracted and showed to you in FHIR are not the same thing. And that's this idea of a facade, which some of you who are more engineering based might know about. It's like a translating layer that sits on top of your non-FHIR data. So that's a little bit of an aside, but I just want today to be a bit about thinking about the bigger picture, like, you know, where's this FHIR data going to come from? And the answer is it's going to come not from little text files on GitHub, but from your real data when you have it from your Excel files and loaded into SQL tables and then converted to FHIR. Okay, so yeah, two sides of the coin there, but there's also another kind of two views of FHIR. There is our data, our models of data, our different resources, and then there's the API for reading and writing them. So again in FHIR you've got two sides of things. You've got our data models, and you've got our method of moving that data backwards and forwards. So we've got resources and the REST API for moving those resources back and forwards. So we'll get to hands-on before too long, but while we're still in sort of tutorial mode, this is the URL, the web address that you might have already just been to. And you can see here I've divided it up into different bits. So let me make that a little bit larger. So going to get larger. It's going to get larger like that. Yeah, so we've got, it's a web address, a URL like any other, and you can browse to it, but it's got some structure to it. This is the server address, like the home page of our, New York Times or BBC or whatever. That's the server address. If I go there, let's just go there. You can go there. I can go there. Let's pop it in the chat. I mean, it's the same as what's already in the chat, but without the end bit. You'll see something about the server itself, and it'll tell you. So it'll tell you something that might look like I've made a mistake, but if you read the message, it's saying this is the base of the FHIR server. So I'm asking it to sort of do things with the base of the FHIR server, which it's happy to tell me that you can't do that. So it's happily giving me an error. It's not a serious problem. It's just saying, yep, this is the FHIR server, but you don't normally go here of the FHIR server. You kind of go to a more specific place. So that kind of tells us that it's alive. I think if you go even one layer further back, you get a slightly more friendly page that says, this is a FHIR server. Yeah, you get a kind of this is a FHIR server sort of highlight. It tells you where it just come from and gives you a bit of sort of high level info about, you know, what it can do and sort of the source code. You can get source code for it. It's an open source. A lot of FHIR is open source, and this server is indeed open source. Let me go. Am I going back or forwards? Well, never mind. Let's skip that. Get back to our program. Yeah, so you got the FHIR server followed by the name of one of the FHIR resources, one of the FHIR resource types. So medicinal product definition, bit of a mouthful. It would have been nice if it was a shorter name, but hey ho. That's our resource type, our type of data that stores the core drug information. So the second part is the name of this FHIR resource, and you'll keep using that today. And then the third part is specific to a particular one. So if I go over here and show you that in action, I'll just take that bit off temporary. You've got the three bits. You've got the name of the server, the name of the resource, and the name of the ID. There's actually another product here that doesn't have the step one. So if I go for a slightly different ID like that, it would give me a different ID. It looks more or less the same as it happens, but you know, if I put a your ID on the end of there, it would find something. If there was one called that, that'll give me a 404. I'm pretty sure, yeah, because that one doesn't exist. But you can see this is the sort of the most variable bit, followed by you can do different types of things. I could do an organization in there. They also won't find that because there isn't one like that, but it's telling me that it's a slightly different message because there's no organization. If I put something completely rubbish in there, like, you know, something doesn't exist, it'll give me a more weird error. It says it doesn't know how to handle that concept at all. It doesn't recognize it as a real piece of FHIR, and then it gives me a list of the things that it does recognize. Okay, let's move that little window over there. All right, so this just talks about what I've just said to you. And then I encourage you to, if I can go back to it, we already did have a quick look through it, didn't we? And we saw how it had, you know, the name in there and the gastro-resistant tablet bit and so on. But if you want to know what all these things here are, you know, what is this thing? What does that mean? And what goes in the description? Is it the name? Is it the recipe? What is it? How would you know what that is? Well, of course, you go to FHIR itself, and that may or may not be applicable for you. I'll drop it in the chat, and I'll go there, and you get a page in the FHIR standard, which is hl7.org/FHIR. And if you want to look at FHIR in general, just click on the logo. It'll take you to the home page. Now let's go back to where we were, and it tells me about this resource in particular. And what's it do? It does detailed defining data of medicinal products and so on and so on. And you'll find a little diagram. If you go down, you'll find scrolling down a bit fast there. I mean, read this at your leisure. You can see the definitions of things. Make that a bit bigger. You can see, well, the description is, what is it? Well, it says general description of this product. You know, not too much, not giving away too much. But if it was something more sophisticated, you would hear about it there. And you can click on these things and go into it. If you look on the UML tab, you'll see a nice diagram that gives you the idea that, oh yeah, the names are over here and the contacts are over here and so on. Just a bit easy to read for some of you, perhaps. So that's core FHIR and the medicinal product definition. And there's obviously one for every resource. So if you go to resource types up here, some of you may already have been all around FHIR. You can see the different ones. You can see organization down there, for instance. There you go. And yeah, see all about organizations, and that they have names and they have people and they have parts and so on. So yeah, that link takes you to that UML diagram directly. And yeah, this might be useful. This is a kind of overview of how drugs work in FHIR, as in manufacturing of drugs and the detailed definitions of drugs. It's a kind of 2 or 3 screens worth of you know, high level overview. You've got a product. Where does the packaging go? Where does the ingredient go? And where does the substance go? And so on. It'll sort of walks you through it a bit, somewhat like what I was showing you a little bit before. So that might be useful background information. Front page of FHIR, and then of course we've got our Accumulus specific guide to fire resources in CMC. So if I click on that, perhaps also put that in the chat. You can go there, and I will go there, and you see the web version of the kind of coded version that I showed you on GitHub before. The source for this was in that GitHub thing. So you can read about how we're going to make FHIR, how we're going to describe how FHIR works, not in general, not for patients, not for prescriptions at the pharmacist, but in industry, in CMC data, and taking FHIR into specific areas. And we're saying, well, which resources are we going to use in this area? So in here, you'll see, we're using medicinal product. Okay, well, we know about that. We're going to be using bundle. Perhaps I haven't mentioned that today, but it's there. Plan definition, we mentioned that. And we're going to be using all these medication, ones that you've seen already, but we're not using, for instance, patient, because we're not talking about patients. It's not direct patient care. We're not using appointments because it's not about patient appointments. So there's a whole load of FHIR which is not mentioned in here at all because it's just not relevant to CMC data. So this guide is, focusing you down on what you need for pharmaceutical quality use of FHIR. And there's a lot of detailed stuff in here, and to some extent the stuff I'm showing you today is a little bit more basic and introductory than what's in here. So this exists, but I'm not saying don't look at it, but I'm saying I'm almost giving you the kind of, before you even get to this, perhaps I'm giving you some of the real basics. I'm saying, well, why are we using this and what do you do with it? But then you can come along here and look at some pretty complicated examples, more complicated than the ones today, that say all about how you use these things in a bit more detail. So certainly don't forget that. And let's make that a bit smaller. Yeah, another couple of links taking you to a specific part. That's fine. And we talked about our IDs. Yeah, so while we're back on, and really I'll be get to hands-on pretty soon, when I find my my drug products, which I've lost. This must be here somewhere. Let me find the chat and go back to my products. So many windows. You'll see this ID here. Remember, we've got a server address. That's the server you're going to be using. You can be poking around it right now, and you're going to be using it in Postman shortly. That's the name of this sort of category of data, our resource name, and that's the name of this actual one. Now you'll notice that thing there matches this thing here. So the ID, the identifier of this chunk of data, is embedded in the data, and it is also in the web address for the data. They always match. And if there was a step 2 one, which there isn't, if I went there, it would show me step 2 here. So you can see that to find resource ID, whatever that might be, somebody says, oh, look at resource 27,000. You would go, right, it's a medicinal product, and I would go 27,000 and put it in there, and that would produce me the page that says ID 27,000. So this is kind of like an index of that. The address, the location, the web location, secure intranet, but nevertheless a web location of this data is the URL with its ID on, and it matches the ID. So this concept of ID and location, identity and location being two sides of the same thing in FHIR. That's a kind of a key FHIR principle. And when you load data onto a server, it will assign you an ID for each resource because the server assigns the IDs, and then you can go to the URL and put that ID on the end, and it will take you to the data that you just added. And if you copy that URL and give it to somebody else, because it's a shared server, they'll be able to see the same data on that ID as well. So that's how our exchange works. Yeah, so you might be reading this through, or probably more than likely listening to me do it. This data here, again, if I go down the page, seeing things like name and stuff that I vaguely recognize, down the end here, we've got a manufacturer, organization / manufacturer. Now we know that organization is one of our FHIR categories, one of our FHIR resources, and manufacturer, the slash bit on the end, looks an awful lot like this slash up here. So in fact, we can, if we don't already know, we might guess that I can go here Yeah, I can put the same server address, a different organization, different resource type, and an ID. Copy them both. I copy them both in one go, but they're sort of conceptually separate. That's the type of the thing, and that's the ID of the thing. It could be a number, it could be manufacturer -1. It just happens to be a simple word, manufacturer in this case, but that's an ID. If I go there, and you can go there, let's slap it in the chat so you can go there. If I go there, what do I see? Well, I see some organization data. Let's have it in XML for fun. I can see, and it's got the, lo and behold, it's got that ID. I mean, manufacturer, it's not a name. This isn't a realistic FHIR ID. In the real world, that would be called, 567-93 or something. So this is an internal, system-only, FHIR-only database key for this record. It's not what the FDA call it, because that's this thing. It's not what it's called in Dun and Bradstreet. It's not the postal address. It's an internal FHIR key. FHIR IDs are internal, opaque, meaningless keys. And yeah, you can see it's an organization. It's got a name, and it's got a made-up name, and it's got some contact details. So that's an organization, and you can connect that using that reference. This thing down here is a, well, it didn't go back far enough. Using this reference, you can, it's like a hyperlink from this product to the manufacturer of this product, which is another resource and another page on the server. So FHIR data is pages on servers, and we map our tables onto intranet style pages. Okay, so I hope you're following along. And you can go to those links there and look at the definition of organization. I showed it before, or you can look at our DXPQ guide to organizations. So yeah, we know that FHIR has multiple resources. We know that they have IDs. Each ID and each URL, they're the same thing really, and they link to each other like an intranet. So we're already seeing multiple pages, and you can hop between them as we just did. I went from one to the other, but it's a bit of a cut and paste job. So it's nice if we have tools that let you kind of hyperlink from one page to another, but ideally you want to see it kind of as a picture. It's hard to see a bunch of tables and get the handle that, get the hang that this is a product with some, well, what's that organization doing? Or is it sitting there? Is it somewhere else? It's a bit hard to see. So there is a tool, and here it is, and you can play along. I'll put that in the chat as well. And assuming it's alive and up and happy, it's here it is. Yeah, and you can put in the address of a resource. Let's pick that one from my screen, which I think is already in your chats. I'll put it back in the chat for fun, since it's in my clipboard. I will go to this and put that in this little box here. And what is it saying? It's saying, I'm just using this as an application now. And instead of using it's like a browser. Instead of using a browser to go to this address, I use this. It's like a browser within a browser. And I go to the same sort of things before. We know it's the same server, nothing new. Same resource type, nothing new. Same ID, nothing new. Hit the button, and fingers crossed, it takes 10 seconds or so sometimes. There we go. And it shows me a product with a bit of, it's sort of a bit more human readable, rather than the XML it shows down below, which is a bit sort of gobbledygook occasionally. It suppresses some things like the code. The coded number here is hidden, but the gastro-resistant tablet human readable bit is somewhere there. And then instead of having just the reference at the end in the XML, this scrolling down, we have this kind of slightly cryptic organization / manufacturer. It goes there, it does that extra hyperlink for you, fetches that data and sort of puts it in line. So you can kind of see that the operation organization, the manufacturing organization of this product is this thing. So there's a couple of reasons I'm showing that. One is it kind of looks nice, and it gives you a kind of view of, okay, this connects to this. But the fact is, it's following the FHIR links. Yeah, and you're going to be putting a product on the server in a minute, and then a few minutes later, hopefully putting an organization on the server, and you're going to be linking them. And if this site can show them linked, then you've got it right. But if you put your product in your organization, you come here and it doesn't show the organization, then there's a good chance it's not linked up properly. So this is a bit of a FHIR displayer. It's also a bit of a kind of debugger. It's not a user interface for patients or users, it's more of a data technician's tool for showing how things connect together. So we can use that throughout the day if you choose to, or if you're happy with just Postman on the web, that's entirely up to you. So it's the same data behind the scenes. So just to stress that, it's still the same data on the same server. Same, I can go with a browser, I can go with Postman, or I can go with that viewer tool. It's all the same data. We're just putting applications on top of the database. It's like a database viewing program. So there's no extra server or anything. It's all the same data. You can write it with one tool, read it back with the other. So if we look at a slightly different ID, this ID here is the same product but without the step 1 on the end. The step 1 product I made a little bit simpler, just so it wouldn't sort of blow your minds too much. This is the step 1 product and it's not got much in it. If I use that other URL from this walkthrough from step 1, it's just the same thing without a step 1 on the end, and show that, you see a slightly richer, it probably takes slightly longer, and you see a slightly richer view of it. What this is doing is going away, looking for organizations, finding it, looking for ingredients now, finding it, a substance and organization. So you can see 5 resources. The product is linked to an organization, AAA Pharmaceutical. It has an ingredient, an active ingredient. That ingredient in turn has a substance, stalbatalol, and that substance in turn has a manufacturer, and it's an organization again, similar type of thing, but not the same one, because you can see the numbers different and indeed the name and address are different. So one organization could manufacture both, but in this case 2 different organizations. So you can see a picture of 5 resources there, which matches our diagram of earlier. That's sort of our top strata. I'll just move that across. It matches pretty well that, and the colors are the same. So you got your drug, your ingredient, and your substance, and an organization. So that kind of matches what you're seeing on here, and the colors match as well. So yeah, that's the sort of you can be thinking about that if you like. I won't ask that out loud, but that's an interesting thing to wonder about. At XML level, the 2 resources, the step 1 and the non-step 1 are all the same. If I look at the XML down here, it's actually pretty much the same XML as the other one. It links out to manufacturer, but it doesn't mention anything about the ingredient or the substance, and yet somehow up here it's got the ingredient and the substance. So how is that happening? This is a bit strange. I haven't changed the XML and yet more data has appeared. Well, it's a different product, so that's why. But how does this different product, which doesn't mention an ingredient in here, how is that getting the ingredient? Well, the answer is that links in FHIR go both ways. So the product points to the organization, but possibly confusingly, unexpectedly, the ingredient points to the product. Sometimes that might be a bit hard to fathom, or it just needs to make no sense. Why wouldn't everything just follow from the product downwards? But there is a kind of rationale to it. You can't have everything pointing to everything in one direction, because otherwise it just wouldn't work. Things have to point in the kind of relevant direction. So this ingredient here is actually pointing back to the product, which is why you can't see it in the XML for the product. It's not mentioned. But if I go there, and this is actually a hyperlinkable thing as well, when the little mouse turns into a hand, you can go there. I'll open it in a new one, and again, it takes a little time. It's all live. You can see that this ingredient resource is still linked to my substance. It connects through with a reference back to my demo product ID. So the reference is there. It's just on the sort of outer part rather than the inner part. It's like an outer join in a database, or I won't get too SQL, but yeah. And again, so but the ingredient does point to the substance. So that is the substance there being pointed at by the ingredient. And you can actually see on this slide here, not that slide, that slide, that you can see the direction. Actually, that's wrong. That arrow should point the other way. Yeah, conceptually that's the manufacturer, but in fact the manufacturer arrow should go that way. But the 4.1 is correct. It does go that way. Yeah, and so on. So yeah, note to self, that's the wrong way around. Okay. Yeah, so what I'm going to do now is give you a few minutes to do this. If you haven't already done that, I'm going to give you 5 minutes thinking time to recap. Those are the steps that I did, and they're in this document. Have a look at those IDs, click on them if you haven't already, and then if you've already done all that, you can start reading step 2. But I'll keep quiet for a couple of minutes. In fact, what I'll do is I'll go and get a glass of water. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. But go through those steps. Get ready with any questions, and then we'll start on step 2 in just let's say 2 or 3 minutes. I won't be far away. If anybody else wants to ask a quick question now before I go, or Rita or anybody wants to chip in, now's a good time. Okay, so have a look at those steps.
Yeah. So some of us have not been able to get to the viewer, Azure website viewer. Our proxy is not letting us through. So,
right.
But anyway, so
that's a bit of a shame. Yeah, I wonder. It doesn't look right. You can't get to any Microsoft site or any Azure hosted site. Then that's a bit of a problem.
Right.
I mean, is there any way of? Have you got a kind of? I don't know if that would be breaking all the rules, but could you use a sort of like a 3G connection or something, or you'd be breaking your proxy rules of your company, I suppose?
Yeah, we would. Yeah, we're pretty tied down, locked
down.
With our machines. So, all right,
okay,
it's fine though. I'm just
no worries,
probably will just follow along more from watching than doing. So
yeah, sure. I mean, that's only part of the thing. So I mean, the other steps of using Postman and stuff, if that's not locked down, I mean, displaying the results in a graphical thing. I mean, one thing you could do when you if you get your data on the server, send the link to me. I'm asking people to do that anyway, and then I can show it for you. In fact, somebody, Aidan, has even done that right now. He's way ahead of me, and he's created a medicinal product definition there. There is one, and he's come up with a kidney pain medication in record time. And let's put that, oh, that's not the right one. Let's put that in here, and we can see it. There you go. So a brand new drug has been discovered, and it's kid relief for kidneys, not for children, but for kidneys. There you go. Excellent. So good stuff. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to disappear and get a glass of water and give you a couple of minutes to work through stuff, and you can let me know how you get on. Back in just a second. Okay, so I'm back. Hopefully you're having a look at these steps. Yeah, step one is just clicking on things and having a bit of a read around, and I've already clicked on those kind of for you and maybe did it as you're going along. So not too much more to do there. Let's dig into step two a bit, and I can see Aidan has already been there, and we've got a quick demo of that, so that's great progress already. But so yeah, in this we're going to go to GitHub, and if you're XML or JSON flavored, all right, okay, that's good. Let's just Aidan's up. Right, I can see Aidan, you've updated a product there, but in fact you've updated a different one. It looks like you've put a second one, which is fine, but it means you've created another one rather than updating the original, because your original one was 9452, I think. So you probably posted a second one, which is completely fine, but you've not updated the original one, as it happens. That's okay. Yeah, so find one of these. I don't know if it works if I click on it. Probably does. And you can use this little copy thing here. I'll do it in Notepad for fun. And you can see, you get the XML in there. What I will do actually is put it into my proper tool, if I can find it. That's Postman for future reference. And then I've got, this is my editor. So this is what I use. I use Oxygen, a good solid tool. And I've got this XML here. Close that always takes ages. And yeah, it's giving me something that looks like what we've seen before. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Very like what's already on the server, but this time it has no manufacturer at the moment because we're going to get you to add that yourself. And it has no ID. So all the ones we've seen so far on the screen have an ID. That's not it, but here's the one. Now I'm jumping backwards and forwards between JSON and XML, which might be confusing. Let's work in XML for a while. So this one is Aidan's, and he's got an ID assigned of 9453. So the ones I put on the server have nice names like demo one and things like that, but normally it gets assigned automatically a numeric number. Well, on this server it's numbers, numeric. They can be anything, but on this server they happen to be sequential numbers. So 9453, that has been assigned by the server. So Aidan will not have typed that in. He will have been given it. So this is my one. I've just downloaded it from GitHub. I'm going to take that XML. I'm not actually going to change it. Oh, great stuff, Caroline. Progress there. So many windows. I'm going to look back at my instructions, and they say pick one or the other. Fine, open it in your editor, make some test data, change it to be unique to you. So let's do that. I forgot to do that. Yeah, so let's put in, I don't know, Rico Celine. And let's say it's, I don't know, it's an amazing, let's say it's a placebo. Doesn't really work. Oh dear. Okay, so but all the rest, yeah, so I'm not changing anything else. I could change that. I could make up a code. You can go there and well, if you know how to get onto that list, you could put a new code in, but I won't bother doing that. I'll leave it as it is. Maybe I'll change it to 30 milligrams for fun. And I'll copy all that. Notice it's quite easy to break it. If I was to do something like that, take the bracket off or take that off, that isn't going to work when I send it to the server. The server will check that it's basically FHIR. That's not even XML because it's broken. And if I was to not use root, but I say I want to change that, and I want to say I don't want to call it root, I want to call it, like drug roots. The server isn't going to know that that is not an official FHIR name. These things are not just made up; they're the definitions from FHIR. So that would not work. The server would reject that and give me a 400 error, I think. But assuming I copy the right version, and I'll keep track of that file. I won't lose that because I might need it again in a minute. I'm going to post it onto the server. So I'm going to fire up Postman, which I did earlier because it takes a long time to load. I'm going to make a new tab. So I'm going to send some data to the server. So that is a post. I'm going to post data to the server. That means create me a new resource, please, on the server based on this data. Okay, so what data? Well, this data here in the body. There's various different places you can put it, if it's encoded or binary or whatever, but I'm just going to use plain old raw text. Well, XML text, paste it in there, making sure I've got the beginning and the end. Okay. Note there's still no ID. That's fine. It will get one. Now I need to know the name of my server, which is in lots of windows. It's in that window. My server and my resource type. This is a medicinal product definition. That's what it says right there. And then I'm not going to put an ID on. I'm not going to put it at, number 3 or something like that, or number 1. I'm going to say add it to the general medicinal product definition area of the server. Please make this one of the things in the medicinal product definition set or collection, whatever you might want to call it. And if I hit send now, I know that this will fail. If I'm just going to do it, I'm just going to do it. Just to sort of show what might happen. It will fail because it doesn't know what sort of data I'm giving it. You can put XML or JSON in here, and it needs to know which it is. It can't work it out. Or it doesn't like to work it out. So it comes back with an error. 400 is an error. Bad request. I've seen it already once today. It's telling me that content type header of text plain. Okay, I don't remember setting that. And the answer is I didn't set that. I forgot to set that. So my content type header, for those of you who know about HTTP, and for those of you who don't, it's a learning experience. When you send data to a server, web server, you send body text and you send headers that sort of control the process. You type them in here, and content type is probably the #1 most famous HTTP header. And there's a magic value that you need to know in here. I think it's written in the document. In fact, I'm going to cut and paste it from the document because I'm lazy. Application FHIR plus XML. So this is a funky coded value that you just need to know. It's a bit like you might see like text HTML or PDF. It tells you what kind of stuff you're sending. It's a MIME type, an internet MIME type. So now I'm going to send it not plain text, which is what it defaulted to, but I'm going to send it XML. If I put JSON in there, that would only work if it was JSON. Let's try that for fun. Hey, go crazy. It's going to tell me that it can't understand my data because it's not in JSON. It's in XML. Here we go. Failed to parse body as JSON. Right, not surprisingly, because it wasn't JSON. So I got that wrong. So let's change it back to XML. And hit go. And fingers crossed. There we go. I've got a 200 series message, which means success. So 200 success, 400, the famous 404 error, failure. So 201 created. So my record has been created. So where's it being created? Well, it's been created at or of this ID here. So it's given me the lower half echoes me back the same resource, but sort of annotated with an ID 959459. So that's now a new place on the server. It's a new ID and it's a new location on the server. So if I go back to here, either using ordinary browser or using this guy, forget everything like that, there'll be a new ID at a new location. I can do that and I'll find, with luck and 5 seconds or so, yeah, a new product, ricocillin, ID 9459, placebo only, and I left the same. I changed that, didn't I? So, your drug, your data on that shared server. So Aidan's updated his original one. That's good trick, very good. Just following the chat. Let's have a look at Aidan's one. Flight 2. There we go. There it is. Still there. That's very good. Yeah, so Aidan's up to the next step, which is Yeah, so I showed you these bits where you put in the content type, and you can, try this if you're not following along today, or it's going a bit too fast today, or you want to do it hands-on later. Do it hands-on next week or whenever you get a moment. I put in JSON in that picture there, but chose to put in XML, and I got a 201 created, and I had some problems with a 400 earlier when I was not correct doing the headers properly. Let's see what happens if I put some real junk in here. So remember, this is the bit that came back, not the bit I sent. So I don't want to mess with that. I want to change my body. I'm going to put something in here. I'm going to put in a new thing. I'm going to not have root. I'm going to say root made up, something that doesn't exist in FHIR. Now that is valid XML because I'm going to do it properly. That would be valid as XML. Nothing wrong with it in XML terms, but as FHIR, it's meaningless. That is not a real FHIR thing. So the server should reject it if I try and post a second one and create another one on a different ID. Fingers crossed the server's got validation turned on. Oh, it didn't reject that actually. That's slightly strange. The server's obviously in quite a sort of permissive mode. Well, what it's done is yeah, okay. The FHIR works in different ways. FHIR servers can be configured differently. This one is obviously configured to ignore junk rather than reject junk. I would need to take an extra step of validation and validate it against this. So perhaps we'll talk about that a bit more later. But yeah, it's stripped out my junk rather than rejecting my junk. So I think that's probably a configuration issue on the server. I would have preferred it if it had said illegal. I reckon if I do something really crazy like that, miss off the whole end of it, that's not even XML. If I do that, it will say bad request. Yeah, failed to parse XML. So it's keeping you honest at that level. If you send it junk, it doesn't like it. But if you send it a non-FHIR thing, it's obviously not configured to reject that at the moment, unless I insist on it validating it using a profile. Okay, perhaps more about that later. So yeah, I mentioned validation here, and it's validating on your desktop with schema and so on. I'll give you a little demo of that. You can on here. This is the FHIR resource I've just copied and put my own placebo anything in there. I'll add it to my little folder here just to give me a no, it wants to save it. Let's call it untitled one. Yeah, if I connect it, I'm going a bit fast here, and I'm not showing you how to do this very well. But I'm going to connect it to my FHIR R5 build, which I prepared earlier. And if I apply that, it validates it against the FHIR schema offline and tells me it's successful. So now if I change that to some junk, not only does it, well, if I hit the button, will it do it? It's even giving me a clue as I type it that it's red underlined it, and it's saying invalid content was found starting with blah 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 blah. One of root or indication is allowed. That thing is not allowed. And if I hit the button and do a proper test, it'll go, yeah, invalid content. So different levels of FHIR validation at different steps in the process. There's lots of validation in FHIR, and it can stop you from making these mistakes. Let's do that. If this has been mandatory, root is optional, but if it hadn't been mandatory, in fact, name is mandatory in FHIR for a product. So if I take that out and do that, when I validate that, it will say like the whole thing is a spelling mistake now because the whole structure is wrong because it doesn't have one of the following things, and the reason is that name is a mandatory thing in a drug. So put that back in. That will now pass. Yeah, so some desktop level validation is possible as well. Okay, how are we doing for time? 3:15. Yeah, so I showed the little tool for getting the data back, but you can use Postman for getting it back as well. I posted it on this tab. I'm going to make another tab. I'm going to copy that. Well, in fact, not what I'll do. The good trick is to duplicate that tab. Makes another one the same. Keeps giving me the same body and everything. But I'm going to take that out. Probably not. Don't need to take it out actually. But I'm going to do a get, and I'm going to put the ID in, which I can't remember. Going back to the previous tab, it was, well, I created two, I think, in the end. But I've lost it because the last one was not successful. So let's go back to here. It was that. So let's do a get on this tab, and I can do an HTTP. Let's check that. That's the same URL as before. It's my medicinal product type, and that's the ID I've been assigned by it. I'm leaving my headers as they are. I'm not sending any data, so I don't really need that in there. Never mind. And if I send that, it will give me some. There we go. It gives me my XML back with my ID, treatment for kidney pain. Oh, that must be the wrong one then. That is that's Aidan's one. That is Aidan's one. Yeah, mine was 5. Oh, what was mine? Well, you got to write the lesson of the story is you got to write things down. So mine might have been 3 or 4. Mine anyway. Yeah, so I've lost the ID of it, but I should have written it down. But whatever your ID is, how would I know what my ID is? If I lose my ID, what would I do? Well, what I would do is go to the server with some tool and look at the whole set of medicinal products, all of them like that. And this will take longer. It shows me all the ones on the server. And it's actually giving me a hint here. The 9541 ID has actually got a bit of a broken thing in it. It's telling me. If I look down here for my one, where was my one? There one. My one was that one. 9461 was mine. Oh, and somebody's made a Doctor's Brew one, snake oil. Excellent. No more sneeze. Very good. So these are building up. And yeah, good stuff. Got 4 or 5 on there. That's excellent to see. So if I put the right number in this time, was it 9542? No, it wasn't. It was 9461. Yeah, that's my one there. The placebo only one. Yeah. So you got to remember your names. You got to remember your numbers. And if this is being done in software, the software that sent this would automatically grab the ID back, store it in your database or whatever, and use that when it was talking about that product going forward. So computers are better at remembering things than some humans like me. So yeah, we can keep using our little tool. We've got all the products that are going on here. Let's look at Doctor's Brew one. If I click on that, it'll take me to a page just about that. And in this mode, it would bring forward any linked bits. Looks like there aren't any linked bits yet, but that's fine. And you can see there 9547 and see some stuff about it. So if I wanted to see what these codes are, so it's got a description, we've got a route of administration, but what code is that? You can hover over it there and it'll tell you it's that code, or you can do this thing, show codes, and it'll reveal the sort of hidden codes. So that's can be useful. But normally they're hidden because this is very well. This is, you can see this XML is like 5 times as long as this and not so easy to read. So this concentrates on giving you something that's kind of short and readable without giving you the whole thing. Right, let's push on. So yeah, people are putting that back in the chat. That's great. Aidan's created an organization. Let's go and have a look at his organization. There it is, Acme Pharma Inc. So that's great. And then the next step is to connect that to the products, and we're moving forward nicely. Yeah, so that's that. We've done that. We've got it back again. Put and get, and then we're on to step 4. So Aidan's already racing ahead in an excellent fashion. You can get one of these organizations from here. Let's do JSON this time. Do it. That's a little organization in JSON. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go over to my editor, make a new page, make a new JSON page. Get rid of that, paste it in, and it's an organization. It's got no ID, that's fine. It's got no identifier. I'm going to say it's I don't know, Blogo, whatever. I'll give it any old name, Blogo 123. I'm going to say it's I don't know, Accumulus Inc. or something. And let's change it to the UK, and let's have Birmingham, where I am today. Okay, so that's a little organization. I'm going to take that little chunk of data, which I haven't done by hand. I've actually extracted it from my contacts system, which most I'm sure most of you will have some sort of contacts, or even if it's the email database or something, you've got some sort of database connected to your manufacturing process, I'm sure. Or if not, then there's probably one in your future soon. So I'll extract that record, not by hand, but in JSON from my contacts system database, which I'm hosting. And I'm going to pick a tab I've already got because I've done this already. Oh, maybe I haven't gone actually. Well, okay, let's duplicate our previous post tab. Duplicate that. But now I'm doing an organization. So I'm going to my body, create that, put it in there. That's my organization. I've just edited it. I'm going to post it to organization point like that. No ID at this point, remember. Body is not XML, it's JSON. So I might as well fix that before I make that mistake. And I'm just going to go. What the heck? See if it works. No, it did work. 201 created. So I've created an organization with ID 9465. I'm going to put that in here for fun. Spelled that wrongly. So yeah, there it is. Well, there it's coming. Hopefully, there we go. So that's my little organization, and I've got a new ID which I didn't make up. Signed for me 9465. Now I'm going to connect that to my product, and I'll say that this is the manufacturer of that product. At the minute, this is just an organization. It doesn't say what it is. It could be a manufacturer. It could be a pharmacy. It could be the FDA. It could be anything. It's a sort of a contextless organization. And the way it becomes a manufacturer is by a context-specific link to a drug. If the link to the drug was regulator, then it would be the regulator for that drug. If it was sort of repackager, it would be the repackager for that drug, or whatever it might be, or the tester, or the lab, or whatever it might be. So organizations are context sensitive, and they're sort of naturally context free until you use them in a given context. That's what I'm trying to say. Right, one of many windows I have here. I'm going to go back to my product, if I can find it. I got it there. 9461 was mine, and I'm going to put it back on the same address and the same ID. So I'm going to basically take the data from down here, put it up there, and I'm going to, well, what I'm going to do first is put it into my editor so I can do it carefully. I'm going to make a new one again. I notice I'm mixing XML and JSON like nobody's business, but that's fine. FHIR is completely agnostic. You can flip backwards and forwards however much you like. So that's my existing drug, which is now on the server, but I want to put in the manufacturer, don't I? It's a little bit complicated in FHIR, but this will, if I add it to here, add it to file, yeah, and then assign it a schema, it will, yeah, I know there's not one. That's why I'm asking you to do one. There we go. Yeah, validation successful. So now if I take out the name, it will tell me it's a problem. Yeah, put it back in and it's fine. Okay, so, but now I can put in the operation for a, I could copy and paste one from the server, because we know that there's manufacturers, there's products, the demo product has a manufacturer already. So I could copy it and paste it from there, but I'm just going to go, what the heck? I'm going to put the organization in, and I'm going to go reference, and I'm going to go value organization slash, and then what was my newly assigned organization? It was 9465. No, you can pick anyone. You can pick an existing organization. I could pick Aidan's organization, 9462, but I'm going to pick my own. I'm going to put it in there. I'm going to close that properly. Now that should, I don't think I've missed out any mandatory parts, have I? That's okay. There's more stuff you can put in here to say, I'm not really saying this is a manufacturer, to be honest. I'm just saying it's something to do with the product. So I'm cheating a little bit and being a bit short, but I'm associating the organization. So that's probably good enough given our time constraints. I need to remember that we've got a break coming up at some point as well. I'm going to put that in over the top of that one. New version of the same thing. Right. Look at that. There it is. And now it's got an operation down the bottom with an organization that does that operation. We're assuming that's manufacturing, but I'm being a bit unspecific. I'm going to put it back on top of the same one. And tell you what, before we do that, let's look at my product. For it is this. It's that. Time passes. Yeah, so let's send this. Hope for no errors. 200, okay, good stuff. And you can see the one that's come back now. Same ID, doesn't give me a new ID. It's giving me a new version, version 2. So I've edited it and created version 2. And lo and behold, yes, it's got the organization. And it didn't reject that. If I'd put in a random number in there, it would have rejected that because it didn't. It wouldn't have made sense. So a question on here. Is that Mahi? We've got, yeah, after the 201 created, where do we find the ID? Well, it's in the data that comes back in the body, which is shown in the lower half of Postman. If you don't notice it in closed Postman or carry on and do something else, then you've kind of lost it, and you have to do what I did, which is go back to the server and look at all the products. But when I post, here's one I did earlier. I posted, this is a diagnostic report I did when I was preparing this. I posted it, and the 201 created thing down here, it puts the ID in here. But also, in fact, in the headers, we look in the headers of what comes back, not my headers, service headers. You can see it in a sort of convoluted way in here. So that's where that is. Can you show the convention for the org reference again? I missed that operation, etc. notation. Yeah, sure. So, well, let me just continue where I was actually. I posted that. I put that new version of my product on the same ID, and this time I'd linked the existing organization to it. So now it looks like that, and there's nothing at this bottom bit about the operation or organization. And I'm going to display that again, and it should have updated. Yeah, so it's been able to find it. So the link is good. It's not a broken link. And it's got this thing down here, operation organization reference. So let's look back. This is my sort of shortcut one. But let's look at the proper one. Well, let's start with the shortcut one. Maybe that's all you really want to know. I mean, that's how it is. It's an operation with an organization in it. The operation can be of various types. It can be, you know, manufacturing. It can be whatever. But that's the way it works. I mean, I don't know if you're working in JSON or XML, but I could pop that in there like that for you. In XML, how would you see that in JSON? I think this can do JSON if I go. Yeah, this is a message to the viewer, not to the file server, and I think this will cause the lower half to come back in JSON. Yeah, so in JSON that would be like that. Yeah. Yeah, and if you want to find the more full version, let's go back to my original one I created before today, which I can't remember the ID of. So I'm going to look at all of the products on here, and this is how you find your ID. If you forgot your ID, you basically look it up, and it's this product here. I can click on that, take me to a new page, and there wasn't really much point in doing that actually, but anyway, demo product ID, that one there. If you look at that one, it's got the full thing where it's the manufacturer is an operation, not just with an organization, that bit there. I hope you can see that at the bottom of the screen. But it's got a type as well with this quite complicated code in there. to say what type of operation it is. Is it manufacturing? Is it whatever? So I'll pop that in the chat as well, if that's any use. But you can go and you can get that, get the XML or JSON from that using Postman or whatever. Actually, that's not what I meant to do. I meant to post just that part of it. Yeah, if you want to know what the XML looks like, you can just go there and see an XML or JSON or whatever, what have you. So that's the slightly longer version, which tells you what sort of the normal version, what you should do if you have time. Say what sort of thing is. If it's not manufacturing, it's repackaging. It won't let me type, but if that was repackaging, you could put that in there. And these are just made up codes. Okay, I'll have a brief pause for breath while I look at what we're doing next, and happy to take any questions or general comments. Okay, so some of you will have added an organization. So let's have a look. Let's have a bit of a look at what organizations there are. Let me close some windows, because too many windows. That one was there. And if I go to the server and just go organization, it will show me. And of course, you can do this. You can do it raw. You can do it just in your browser like that. Boom, see all the organizations. There are 8 organizations now. But if you do it like this, you can see what those 8 organizations are a bit more. So the AAA, BBB, your company, SWI, Acme, Excelsior, Logo, Cumulus, and HFH from Manchester, my hometown. Good news. So yeah, so people are getting stuff on there. That's great. Yeah, so that was to add an organization. Step 4, add an organization. It sits on its own. It's not connected to anything. And then you add a link from the product to the organization. So that associates the organization, that reference, the little operation thing. The link between a drug and its manufacturer is a bit more complicated than most. Most references are just like, I'll just take that operation away. They're just like that. It just has the name of the thing and then a reference. But this one is a bit more complicated than most. It has a little operation around it. So you can see that by, if I'm looking at, FHIR, let's go to FHIR. Here is FHIR. And if I go to medicinal product, resource types, scrolling down quickly, medicinal product definition, you can see that it's not just a manufacturer, it's an operation which tells you not only which organization it is, so that's where your organization slots in, but you can also put the type of thing that it is, the date of it, whether it's confidential, and so on. So we're actually working not directly with an organization on here, but an organization in a little extra bit of stuff here. So that's why there's those extra levels. They're useful, but it's perhaps not the simplest case. Okay. Where are we? So we made an organization, and some of you have done that and linked it. Losing the chat, but so I got a 200 return when I updated product, but the org isn't added. Did you definitely do a put? 200 is an okay, and that's normally what you get on the end of a get. Well, is it? No, maybe you would get a put. It might have done what I did before, like it ignored bits of XML that it doesn't understand. If it was not formed correctly, it might have ignored it. Silently and unhelpfully ignored it. When you look at your, so afterwards, the XML is just the same, or the JSON is just the same. It hasn't got it in. If you want to put your whole XML into the chat, you could do, or you could even share your screen if you feel like it. You can figure out if there's anything wrong with it. Okay, that looks grand. Let me see if there's anything wrong with that. I'll copy that. Wow, it goes a long way. let's copy that. Yeah, copy that and put that into my little. I mean, it would be good if you guys had schema validation set up, but it's a bit too complicated to do on something like today. It takes we'd spend 10 minutes just doing that. So that's, I'll just reformat that a bit. Oh, I didn't reformat it very well, but that looks, can't see anything wrong with that. So I will assign a schema to it, and I will validate it. Right, so there's nothing wrong with that. It didn't look like there's anything wrong with it. So why that didn't work, I don't know. Have a look, see if make sure you did put it. I mean, I can have a look. I assume it hasn't worked, and it were the same for me. But I don't know the answer to that. Is the answer? Yeah, it's definitely not got that in it. So something went wrong. Not sure what. Have another go, and if you still can't figure it out, perhaps we can do a screen share or something. So this is where Aidan is at step 5. Oh, something else has appeared. Okay. So yeah, put it on. Link it to the product. It kind of works if with the following wind. Yeah, and then we're moving on. So we're kind of getting into a repeating pattern now. So at the risk of being sort of repetitive and a bit boring, it's nice that this pattern is repeating. So once you've done it once, you can kind of like learn it. But the different resources work different ways. So you can make an ingredient and add that to the product. And this time you don't need to change the product, because as we saw earlier, I mentioned earlier, the ingredient points at the product. So you can add an ingredient, and when you add it, unlike the organization, it has a reference to the thing that it's pointing at. So to explain that a bit more, when I put the organization on before, it doesn't know about anything else. It's just an organization sitting on the server, ready to be pointed at. But the ingredient doesn't work that way. It has a link in the opposite direction. It does point at the product. The product doesn't point at the ingredient. The ingredient, perhaps confusingly, points at the product. So when I put it on, it will become linked. It needs to be linked, and it will become linked to my product like straight away. So that's kind of nice in a way, but if I don't get the link right, it won't even save it for me. So I will go to my sample data, find the ingredient. I'll use JSON again. Clicked on the wrong thing. I will copy that, go to my tool, JSON, create. JSON is not so good for desktop validation. The JSON schemas are not, I haven't got those configured. They do work, but they're not quite as easy to use. So these days there's not that many advantages to XML, but XML schema does work a little bit better than JSON schema in my view. So here's an ingredient. I'm going to change its name to be, I don't know, whatever. It was still in, wasn't it? Rico. And I'm going to, yeah, it isn't there. So I'm just going to leave that the same. There you go. I'll just do that. I'll go, well, perhaps I'll call it Rico Silide or something like that, because it's not the same as the product name. It's the ingredient of the products. So that's what I need to put in there. So this has got a placeholder for my product. It needs to link to my product, otherwise it will fail when I put that in. In fact, let's try that. Although there's a slight worry that, that won't exist, so that's okay. That's okay. So so to show you that the server does help you in some ways, I'm going to duplicate this. Can I find this? I'm going to duplicate that there. And I'm going to change that to be, you don't need to change the ingredients, but don't need to change the title, but I will do. I'm going to post. I'm going to post. Yeah, I'm going to post ingredient. I'm going to put the body in there. That's my ingredient. And I'm going to check that it's JSON, which it is. And this should fail. If it doesn't, maybe the validation is turned off, because FHIR servers certainly can validate this sort of thing. Let's see what happens. 400 bad request. There we go. Resource medicinal product definition. Your ID is not found. So whoops, I clicked on that rather unhelpfully. And yeah, it's junk. That's right. I didn't put the ID in. So not surprisingly, it's refused to store my data. So now I need to go back and remember what my product was again, which I've forgotten again. So how would I remember that again? That's Aiden's one. I think mine was 9461, I'm going to guess. I could sneakily link it to somebody else's, because on this server, there's no compartmentalizing of the data. I mean, on a real one, there would be, for whatever business rules applied. So you wouldn't be able to connect things to other people's stuff, but it's just a scratch pad here. So I could accidentally or on purpose link it to somebody else's product. But if I link it to 9461, and the full link has both the name of the thing you're linking to and the ID of the thing, but the JSON in my editor has already got that part in there. So I'll just take the ID, and I'll just do it inside Postman. Why not? Postman's a little bit of an editor in its own right, so it knows it's one of those. It knows it's one of those. I'm not specifying a server. Notice that this doesn't. I don't have to put in the full name of the server in here. It assumes that from this. But in theory, this could be on a different server. If I really wanted to, I could put that in there, and I could go, a different address, backup server or something like that, or submission server or something. I could cross-link the resources. It's all web addresses. The FHIR is a website, and websites link to other websites, and whether it's on the same machine down the corridor, or a machine on the other side of the Atlantic, makes no difference at all. FHIR is completely distributed by its nature. If I put if I want to send that to the Microsoft website, if they had a FHIR server, I could do. All right, but I now have lost the important bit, which is that bit, 9461. So that should work now, because 9461 does exist. But fingers crossed, 201 created. So I've created an ingredient, and it's given me an ID for it, which I don't care about too much, but it's linked it to that product. So now if I go and look at that product, which I had a moment ago, didn't I? There, it will, with a bit of luck, show me the ingredient. Yeah, so that's been connected. But you'll notice in the XML for the product, it doesn't mention anything about the ingredient. I've not touched the medicinal product, which is one of the things about the way that the ingredient points to the product. If you want to update something about the ingredient, maybe the description of it, maybe the manufacture of it or something. I mean, I know you don't change ingredients for products very often, but if you wanted to add a different sort of flavoring or something, then you can change that without changing the core product. It changes the collection of data, but you don't have to update the product and create a new record every time you change an excipient or something, or add an excipient. So that's part of the rationale for it. But this little thing here is okay to go and find that information. And I can give you a little look behind the scenes. What it actually does, it goes off and searches for a bit of an advanced thing. It goes to do a search on the server to say, oh, that's not the right one, actually. It's this one here. It does a search to say, on the same server, look for ingredients that have a 4, because that's how it links. This thing here is the ingredient. This is an ingredient for a given product. Yeah, so that means it's about that product, and it goes and looks on the server, does a sort of active search to say, find me the ingredients which are for this product, which is my current product. And it also looks for packages. It also looks for administrable versions. It also looks for authorizations, sort of approvals from the FDA and so on. But it didn't find any of those, but it did find an ingredient. So that's what it's kind of doing behind the scenes. It's doing like multiple Postman style HTTP calls behind the scenes, which is why it can find things which are not actually there, if you like. So let's look at the chat. Has anybody? Right. So we've got some. Right. So diagnostic report. So Ali's doing very well. Should we have a look at that? Ali's got right to the end then, perhaps. So some people are working in the background quietly. I picked one of my windows. Let's have a look at that. Very good. Yeah. So that's excellent. So Ali's got all the way to the end pretty much. And yeah, we've got a pH of 6.91 connected to this my drug name. And it's based on a definition. So this is way beyond what we've talked about so far. This is going through to step 10. So we've got a diagnostic report. I won't get too far ahead, but just to say where we're heading, we've got a report with an observation about a batch of the medication. And the batch of medication is about this product, which doesn't show you in line here because it starts to get too bulky. But I think with luck, if I click on that, it will take me to that product, and you can sort of see the other strata. So that's it. I've got this kind of strata or level. I've got this sort of static product, two ingredients. That's quite cool. One's got a substance, one's just got a name, and that's the sort of static thing. And then you can link that to this more dynamic, repeatable. I do a report every month, which is about the medication, about that batch, which is of that thing with a batch number, and it's this observation which has this definition in here. You can say, what do we do? What are we doing with pHs? Well, pHs have an acceptable value from 6.9 to 7.1, so that's excellent stuff. Okay, but that is nevertheless getting ahead of ourselves. We're due a break. I'm not sure quite when we're due a break by our thing, but maybe that is a good time to break. We're due a break after 1 hour and 15 minutes. So that was a while ago. So let's have a break now. 10-minute break. Keep working if you like. Get a drink if you like. We've got another hour and 15 minutes, haven't we? So we'll do another 45 minutes of me doing the demo, and then we'll stop for a bit of a general wrap up and anything that we put, points arising. So let's have a 10-minute break. I'll keep quiet. Put your questions in the chat if you like. Otherwise, it's 1:45 now. Let's see you at like 5:55. Okay, it's 5:02 by my clock. So let's get back to it. If anybody has any more points to raise, then absolutely, that's great. Otherwise, we'll press on for about another half an hour or 40 minutes, and then we'll do a bit of a summary at the end. So yeah, I can see some good progress, people adding organizations and so on. That's great. But yeah, so we've seen these different directions of links, haven't we? So I add an ingredient there and links it directly to the product, and that's the way the direction goes. So what I'll actually do is, yeah, just to say that, yeah, that's right. FHIR has this multi-directional mesh, not mesh of things where things point in different direction. You have to get those things right, and that affects the order that you put things on the server. So if you're doing it by hand, it's possible to get it wrong. You know, once you've written a program to do it, it knows to put the product on first, the ingredients second, and then after that you can leave the product alone and keep putting new ingredients, or you can change ingredients and they will stay linked, or you could add a new one with a new link and so on. So those the rules of the road to that. Yeah, so the ingredient that we put on before, it's just text, and in a lot of these cases, because we're using little small chunks of XML and JSON, they're not really very realistically sized, because it just, you've got to have something manageable for a little test like today. So here I have just the name of the drug. So this is actually a code, but rather than putting a real code in, I've just put a sort of text of a code. So you could put a proper coded thing in there, like a SNOMED code, or a code from the GSRS, like a Unicode or something like that. Or you can go and do another layer and put a reference in there. I'm not going to do this. This might not be quite correct, but it'd be essentially something like substance definition, and the ID of a substance definition that we would have had to add before we put this ingredient on. Or you can update the ingredient later and change it from that text to a substance definition to point to another resource, and then we end up with a picture like the one that we saw before here. So you get this picture where you've got one ingredient. So let's have a look at it. That's that one. That ingredient just has some text, but this ingredient has a reference to a substance called substance, and I think that's the existing substance that's already on the server. So that's being connected up to existing one, and I could probably have a look at that. And well, it's there anyway. Yeah, you can see it there. So the substance here, again, it has a name, and it could have a code, and it could have a whole lot of stuff. It's got a manufacturer, so that points to something else. Notice that this doesn't point to the ingredient. There's no mention in here of the ingredient, but in the ingredient it mentions the product and it mentions the substance. Okay. So I won't do 6.5 because that's kind of what we just talked about, and that's, it's kind of more of the same. You can do that if you want, either now or later. But then we're into somewhat more of the same, but we're sort of moving in a different sort of area now. Our strata, we can call it that, of this guy here. We have this. We've done these already. We've done the product, organization, ingredient, and optionally substance. That's your kind of fixed stuff for a given product, and then this is the bit that repeats. So we're going to, having sort of completed this, we're going to embark on this bit where we make a batch of that. It's a real physical thing that you make at a certain time with a certain date, and you can make as many of them as you like. Whereas this is like an abstract, conceptual, the product as it exists sort of on paper, if you like. This is this sort of physical pile of stuff. This is the data sheet, if you like. So let's get a medication. Let's go for XML this time. There's this. I'm going to I won't copy like that. I'll copy like that. And I'll put it into here. XML this time. Create. And yeah, so it's medication. Doesn't say an awful lot. All it's got in here is a batch number. So I can change that. And you can there's other stuff you can fill in for medication. There's a whole load of FHIR stuff you can say about batches actually. Some of which is in what we call standard extensions. So there's batch information specific for manufacturing that we can add in here, but I won't do that today because it's more about the principles. And yeah, now the one of the slight tricky things about using medication is that it doesn't have a direct link in the FHIR model to a medicinal product. So we have to use, in this case, we have to use an extension. So it's kind of normal in FHIR to use extensions. Not everything you want in FHIR is there. And FHIR doesn't add every last feature that everybody wants into FHIR because it would become really too big and unwieldy. So we will, in any domain, not just this domain, in any domain, you will come across bits of stuff that you would like in FHIR that are not in there. So, that's unfortunate, but it's the way it goes. And if everybody's stuff was in there, as I say, it would become too bloated. So here we have an extension, a specific extension for this project or this domain that we're going to use to say this medication, instead of having an ordinary code that just says amoxicillin or something, it actually has a reference to say, well, which actual product is it? So it's a batch of this product. So we're going a little bit off piste of FHIR here, but using an extension. So let's add that. And where is my postman? Let's let that settle down. I'm gonna, yeah, here's one I did earlier. I'm gonna use that web address. I'm gonna use this body, but that is XML, so I'm gonna change it to XML. I'm going to double check that looks right. I've got, all right, so let's show that this isn't going to work. That isn't going to work because I haven't said what the product is. There's a batch of, it did work. Oh, that's why, yes, okay, right. Okay, that was surprising to me, but I know why, because it's an extension. So this FHIR server doesn't know what this extension means, so it can't check that what it's trying to do. So it doesn't realize that has to connect to a product. So it's accepted that, which is kind of informative, but not what I was expecting. But really, that's not right. It needs to point to my product. And if you're doing this in software, yeah, you wouldn't forget to update that, but I did because I'm human. Let's go. So let's find, I think mine was 9461. I keep forgetting. So let's put that in there and that will also succeed. Kind of working without a save. When you with extensions here, unless you use a profile to check it, which we haven't done as yet, we're working in sort of a little bit without a safety net. So I'll send that and it'll create me one on 9495 there. That's created that. And then if I go to that, let's find the medications. Mine's lot number 8888. Let's make a new one of those. Medication. It was 9495. There you go. So that's it. Yeah, and it's showing the extension, and this viewer knows about this extension. It's because it's it's been taught about the extension basically. So more so than the FHIR server, it knows that there's this definition here. It's taken that definition from this sort of word here. It understands this extension because it's been taught about it, and it knows that if I go there, I can see, oh right, it's a medication about that batch. Well, it's a batch of this stuff. So you can see the split. So this product here doesn't mention the batch because it doesn't. This hasn't been taught to show all the batches of a product. It could do, but there's a kind of a separation in the model between the static stuff and the more where's that gone? I'm going to go back button. The more dynamic stuff. It's not the right one. Yeah, the more dynamic stuff, which the medication batches, which come along on a certain, at a certain time, and there's lots of them. So we've made a batch of stuff for testing with a batch number, and we've said that it's made of this stuff, so you know what's in it. It's not gone. Word document is refusing to come up. So we put a batch number in. You can see, I'm just checking that people are adding things. Yeah, people are still adding data. Yeah, and then this is all about testing. So the reason, and part of the reason for setting up all this infrastructure about products and these products on the server is to be able to run our tests, because we're doing quality control. That's the name of the kind of the area. We're going to submit our tests to somebody who will say, yep, it's okay to put your drug, to keep selling your drug because you've shown that your manufacturing processes are up to scratch and you've got your pH exactly right, because that's the thing that we care about on this particular test. So let's have an observation. An observation is a FHIR test. Let's do a JSON one for a change. Where's that gone? Here's an observation, and we can see it's an observation. It's a coded type of pH, and it's got an R value of 6.91. And it's got something it's about a certain batch. So it's about a batch of this stuff. But notice in here you couldn't put medicinal product definition, because you can't run a test on a type of a thing. You can only run a test on a particular thing, if you know what I mean. So we're not testing that product in the whole world or every instance of it. We're testing one particular bucket of that thing, one particular batch of that thing. So that's why we can have medication in here, but it won't allow us to have medicinal product definition, because you can't run a test on a definition, only on what I call an instance. So let's copy that. I'm just going to go straight into, I've clicked the wrong button there. I'm lost where I am. Didn't want to do that. Hang on a minute. Okay, I'm back where I was. Let's scroll that down. Let's put an observation in. Well, I'll just use the same thing here. Use the same posting thing here. I'm going to post this observation. And I'm going to remember that I want to observe. I'm doing a test on this batch to check the pH of this batch. 9495 is my FHIR ID. 8888 is my real world batch number. So I'm going to post my observation. The body is going to be like that. I'm going to put 9495 in there. And that looks right, but the headers will probably say XML. So I'm going to hope for the best. 201 created. And does it look right? New observation ID. It's got a certain medication as its subject, and it's got a value. And I could have changed that value to, 6.91 or something. Tell you what, while I'm there, I will change it. I'll change it to show you how to update things again. I'll take that ID, slap it on the end, get rid of that, change that to put. Now this is to be interesting. If I put that now, it won't like it, because it doesn't know this ID has to be mentioned in here, and it isn't. So let's try and change that to 6.92, but this will fail, I think, because I haven't mentioned the ID in here, which is fine. Needs it, even though it's kind of implicit from here. It wants to check that what I'm putting here really does match this thing here, and it will probably say, yeah, bad request. Cannot update resource body must contain ID element for update operations. So it's telling me the FHIR rules, give me that little extra sort of, not data validation, I suppose it is a data validation, more like behavioral validation. You have to do things in a certain way in FHIR, and that wasn't correct. So if I put in, to get this right, ID : think that is right. Let's try that. Yeah, that worked. So now it's updated it to 6.92. So if I have a look at that observation, copy that. Did I copy it? Yeah, go to back to my viewer, put that in there. I've got an observation, and what's it about? It's about medication. And what sort of medication is it? Well, it's this definition that we made earlier, which I can go look at, and batch 888. So this observation has a reference to medication. Doesn't say directly what it is. It's 6.92 pH of this thing. This thing is one of these, and the blue thing is one of those. It's that thing from over there. So you can see a sort of the chain developing, which looks very much like this, with a medication of a certain substance with a test about it. And you can do lots and lots of tests. Obviously, you wouldn't just test the pH, you'd test every last detail of it. And then getting towards the end of this exercise now, I'm going to add a report, which is it's like the wrapper for multiple observations. When you want to submit something, you can just submit the raw observations if you like, but it's something of a convention, or not completely necessary, to wrap them up in a report to say these observations go together, they've got a conclusion, they were run by a certain person, it's been signed off by a certain person, and it's kind of like the wrapper around it. So let's finish that bit off with an XML diagnostic report. Get that from GitHub. Didn't want to open. Is it going to open? Click that again. There we go. Here's that. I'll copy that. It's a diagnostic report. And let me show you the structure of that a little bit bigger. So yeah, a diagnostic report is it's a collection of observations essentially. So it has a code that tells you what sort of report it is, batch analysis. It could be, it could be anything. It could be stability. It could be ad hoc testing. It could be whatever you like. It's got today's date. Let's go into the future and set this to tomorrow's date. It's got a series of results, so you can rack up the results like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, if you like. I won't do that. Well, we can put the same one in twice for fun. Or I could cheat and put one of somebody else's observations in. If I could find one, that might be fun. That's not showing me that. Yeah, so this one here that was already done by somebody, I could cheat and copy that if I wanted to. If I put that 9468 ID in there, I could cross-link to some other report, which would actually be about a different drug. So maybe that wouldn't be helpful in this situation. But in theory, you could, link to an observation that was already on the server. But I'll use my own one. I put one on before, didn't I? I put 9498 on before. So I will put 9498 in my list. Let's put it in twice for fun, just to sort of get the idea that there can be two. And I'll put, this went very well or good. All right. And maybe it isn't a batch analysis report. Maybe it's a stability analysis report, whatever that is. Stability report, there we go. And it's got two tests, which happen to be exactly the same. And let's put that on the server. Final thing that I will do. I've got it's hidden that for me rather annoyingly. Here's a tab I prepared earlier, which goes to same server as before, diagnostic report place now. I'm going to put that in there. It's going to be XML. It's not liking it. I think it thinks it's Jason. I think it's Jason. Not quite sure why it's underlining that. It's not a great sign, but let's see. It might be because of that, but I bet it's not. Let's see. Content type is that. Body's that. Maybe it was that. Let's hit send. 201 created. Good news. So, and that's linked to that observation, and that observation, and those observations, the same one, should in turn be linked to the medication batch, which is linked to the product definition, which is linked to the ingredient, which is linked to the substance, which is linked to the manufacturer, and you've got a whole chain of sort of 6 or 7 resources. So 9,500, nice round number. Let's put that in there. That's somebody else's one. Let's make another one of those windows and put 9,500, and after a second or two, there we go. So this did go very well, all good. Two of them, both 6.92, not 6.91, both about the same batch. It could be about different batches. And both, if you click through, will take you to the product, which it is all about. So you see sort of 2 main pages. One is the report and one is the product. Yeah, so which matches quite nicely with our list. So we've done all of that. And we've done all of that. And I'll leave this as a bit of an exercise for the reader. Well, I won't cover it today unless we're really running out of things to do later on. So at that point, let's just see if there's anything else in our thing. We've got, adding a protocol. So that part of the plan is what I'm calling a protocol, and you can go and find the the files for an observation definition that say how you do a pH and what the pH correct values are. Is it 7.0? Is it more acidic or something? And then a plan, and you get something that looks like this. So you can say, well, this is a batch analysis. It must have one test, which is a pH, 6.9, 7.1, another test, which is a visual identification, another test, which is the water content, and so on. And then it's possible to connect the observation, the one that I've already done. I could go back and connect the observation and say that observation test, as well as having a value and as well as being about a certain batch, it is linked to the definition of that test. So you can use that to connect the plan through to the actual observations and say, did we do the right thing? This observation doesn't say in it whether it's past the threshold or not. This thing here will cross-reference it, and you could use that to say, well, yes, it was 6.91 is in the correct range. Okay, so that's the end of the track. I'm going to leave you with step 10 as a sort of take-home thing, and of course you may be on one of the early steps right now, but that's probably a good time to sort of close, really. Not close, but close the that hands-on part. Shout if anybody wants more time on that, but there's obviously more time later. And we're really into our let's move that over there. We're really into our Q&A. So it's over to you guys, really. Rob, is that yourself there, or who'd like to join you at this point?
Who'd like to what? Sorry.
Who'd like to chip in, or is it? Have you got?
Well,
I do a demo for
actually
us,
do have some server-side validation that I could show if you want to do that.
That'd be great, because that's the missing piece, I feel.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to do that, let's see if I can share here. Sure, I've got on the screen what I need. A second there. Okay. Let's see what this does here. Make sure we're seeing the right thing. I don't know if you are. You're seeing the server.
Bad request.
Yeah, bad request. Yeah, exactly.
The root of the server. Yeah.
So back at the root of the server. Yeah, just like Rick showed earlier. So I was going to start there. So I grabbed a couple of the examples that we were looking at as Rick was going through that. Actually, I was also going to turn my camera on while I was talking here too. But so I start there, and then I grabbed a few of the examples and kind of went through a little bit of what this would look like to try to validate some of this. So I'll just kind of step you through it here real quick. It shouldn't really take very long. I'll just copy this and paste. Oops, wrong thing. Let's get to the right spot. So now I will just paste this in. So we'll take a look at that original medicinal product definition resource that he showed, the demo product ID 1. And this is it. And so we want to, let's say we want to take this this instance and see if this is valid based on, we can kind of do a couple of levels on the server, fairly straightforward. One is basically, is it valid FHIR? That's the first thing we can look at. And so maybe let's do that. And to do that, we all really have to do is invoke the validate operation on the resource, which I could just type that in here. Let me just do that. Just add this / and then the $validate. That should do it. And when I do that, then I will get some information, and I'm getting two things here. I'm getting one error and one warning, and with a little bit of additional information about what's going on here. And it's telling me, interestingly enough, that there is the error is saying that there's an unrecognized property called FHIR comments. And then there's also a warning about that we should put narrative in these resources, and you'll see that pretty much throughout if you don't have narrative. But it's a warning, it's not an error. But we want to go back and look at where that thing about FHIR comments came in. We can go back to the resource and scroll down just a little bit. Yeah, where was that actually? Yeah, it was right here. It's under operation. There's this element called FHIR comments, and I don't know exactly why that's there. Maybe Rick can say, but it's not. It's actually not considered to be a valid element. So, do you know why that's there, Rick?
It's when you take, just a bit of context, it's when you take some FHIR XML and convert it. I think on, if you send it to Happy and bring it back, it sort of does that, even though it's not kind of.
Yeah. And so because that's there, it's saying it's invalid. So if you wanted to fix that, we would just remove that. And let's see. Well, I could do what Rick was showing you and update and post it on the server, and we could fix that error, but we won't do that right now. But anyway, that's the basic level validation. And then that's just really looking at it from a FHIR perspective. It's, this was a medicinal product definition resource, and is that valid according to the base FHIR specification? But you can also do another level of validation. In this case, it's not going to be particularly super interesting because it doesn't really change anything much. At least I don't remember that it did. We can double check, but you can validate it against the profile as well, the specific one that you're interested in. So for the DXPQ IG, there's a profile on medicinal product definition for the drug product, and we can validate it against that profile and then see what we get. And it doesn't change anything. Like I said, you will see that, and the other ones it'll change it a little bit. So that's one example. And then I picked another one of the medicinal product definitions that I think, I forgot who, Adrian, whoever, Aiden, whatever. Sorry, I may have your name, said your name wrong, but posted. So I think that's this one. Let's take a quick look at that. And just look at what it is again. So it's this gastro-resistant tablet and all that. And, so we can then try to validate this one. Again, we can just, very easily, I'll just type it in, the $validate for the operation. And in that case, we don't have any errors. We have a warning still, which says it should have a narrative. So same thing we saw before there, but no errors this time. So that's nice to see. We don't have that as extraneous element or anything else that looks like it's having a complaint about. Okay, so and if we do the profile validation here, I think we see something a little bit different. So let me do that. I recall, if I'm remembering this correctly. So again, we're going to validate it now specifically against the medicinal product definition drug product profile in the DXPQ IG. So, no, I guess, okay, no, it's not. It's again the same thing. So it's a good valid resource. It's valid in both ways. You will see something in the diagnostic report. The profile will pick up some new things. I think that's where I saw that. So anyway, that's the idea of the basic validation. And just for interest, maybe I can show what the actual profile looks like just a little bit. It might be a little hard to read, but to see. But this is a structure definition resource, which is what FHIR profiles are. Again, it comes from the implementation guide that we're working on, and there's a lot of detail here, which I won't go into a whole lot, but you've got a big long snapshot, which is always, if it's in there, it's always really kind of hard to get through. But if I go all the way down to the bottom, then we actually see that the profile itself is pretty simple. So the differential is what actually it's doing that's different from what was in the base FHIR resource definition. In this case, it isn't a whole lot. Basically, it's just saying certain things there must support. So that's why you really didn't see that there was any real difference, because it's not really requiring anything specific that it would validate against. But it is doing the validation. So that's the good thing. So I got one more example I was going to show, and this is on a diagnostic report. And let's just go through that. So this is the report. It's pretty simple, a little diagnostic report. It's one of the ones that Rick already showed. And yeah, with the conclusion, samples have been assessed, and the conclusion is ... Okay, so anyway, so pretty straightforward. Again, we can do the validate bit. Validate. And in this case, we see a couple of things. We've got one warning, again, about the narrative, same thing we saw before. We've also got an information message, and this one's about terminology. It's saying that none of the codings provided are in the value set LOINC diagnostic report codes, because that's something that's supposed to be in there for a diagnostic report, or at least I say supposed. That's a little bit too strong a statement. We maybe don't need to look at it right now, but the resource basically has a binding to terminology, and we have, our resource didn't have a code that fit that. And if we can go back and maybe quickly look at that, the code, we had a code here from, an accumulus, this would be from a cumulus system. So it's not from the one that the FHIR specification, had in it. So it flagged that for us. But if we do the profile specific validation, oops, get the right spot. Now we can go ahead and there's also a diagnostic report profile that we can validate against. So we'll do that. So this is diagnostic report stability study results. If we do that, then now we still get the narrative as we did before, but this time we don't have that terminology thing, because basically I think that code matches what's in our profile. We can go look at it here in a second, and see. But then it's saying something about this extension, which we'd have to maybe look into. Oh, well, actually, no. Sorry, it's not about that. Really, the message is about the conclusion in the diagnostic report. So it's saying that that the definition allows for the type markdown, but it found type string. So that's an interesting error. And if I go back to the resource, we can see the conclusion is just a string. And if I remember correctly, which we may not want to go look for, but I think the base resource allows string, and markdown is a type of string actually, but it's, this is assuming that there be some markdown, something that can identify this as markdown. Apparently that's what it's doing anyway. And since it doesn't find it, it's saying it's not markdown, but your profile said it should be. So we can see where the profile actually does that here. Look at it. And so if we go down to conclusion, we go a little ways down here. So we get down to this part in the profile about conclusion, and we see that the type is basically, it says it must be markdown, basically is what it's doing there. So that's why it's generating that message, because it says it's supposed to be markdown in our profile, but it only can recognize it as a string, and so it's giving you that message to tell you that. So anyway, that's the basic server-side validation. I mean, that's a big long thing there, but that we can do, and yeah, want to have a chance to demonstrate a little bit of that.
So Rob, when this is all implemented, what would be the best practice? Would implementers download a copy of the profile and keep it local, or would they always kind of ping the implementation guide online, the profiles online?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure it has a single simple answer necessarily. I think those are the kind of things that you need to work through, in implementations, and think about what makes sense, from based on the desired goals and performance considerations and all these kind of things. One thing that is pretty sure is that if you try to do full validation on every instance that comes in and out of your server, that can be a pretty huge performance, bottleneck, potentially. I mean, depends on your volume and exactly what you're trying to achieve. And in some cases, it may be important to validate, in detail everything that goes in and out, and that's okay. You can do that, but you have to consider the cost of it, basically. So whether there's a step in, I guess, before anything's posted to a server, it's already been validated. If that's something that people build into their workflow, that could be done, or it could be validation turned on the server. Like, Rick was showing that the server isn't necessarily automatically doing that kind of validation. You have to actually ask for it, like I'm doing here. But you can make it mandatory to do full validation if you want. So there's no single answer. I don't know if anyone else has a further thought on that, but it is something that needs to be considered as we're building out the implementations.
Okay. Thanks.
Do you have any other thoughts on that, Rick? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well. I mean, it just kind of depends, doesn't it? I mean, the point is that these profiles are, relatively small. I mean, it's quite big on the screen, but it's just a small chunk of XML. You could deploy it anywhere. So you could deploy it locally. You can make them public. You could have different profiles for different uses, one for reading, one for writing. So there's kind of an open source configurable infrastructure for validation that's really nice. You can do it here, there, on your laptop, on your local server, on the web. It's kind of like a toolkit that you can do anything with.
Yeah. And there is facility to directly load basically everything in the IG as a package. That can be kind of built into the server instance, and right. We didn't actually do that in this case because you have to kind of build it into the configuration and this, but did it basically the same equivalent by having all the actual individual profiles on the server, so it can access them. That's the main thing. As long as it can access them, it can use them, for whatever level of validation you want to do. But the FHIR package mechanism is kind of designed to make that fairly easy to do. I guess that's the main point of that.
Yeah, it's quite slick, isn't it? I never knew until just now, Rob, which is great for me, that you could just do validation on a get. I thought you always have to post, which adds a little extra hassle. So I never knew that. That's really good to know.
Yeah.
Nice one. Good trick.
So does that mean, Rick, does that mean that's just less effort or less steps? Is that what that means?
Yeah, less steps. It means you can do it right in the browser. You can just put the URL in with the validate on the end. I thought you had to kind of do the whole postman thing where you paste it in and you kind of do the post and you then get it back as a body. You can just do it straight in the browser, which I just never thought of it. It's simpler than I thought. But of course, really, this will be done by software. I mean, people are, we're doing all these things by hand. But again, I want to stress that we wouldn't be doing this by hand, obviously.
I was trying to drop the screen share and I actually hit the wrong button, so I kicked myself out of the meeting. But I'm back. So
yeah, so exactly. There's lots of techniques, and yeah, we're doing it by hand today. But obviously, this would all be nicely wrapped up in functions and user interfaces and things.
Exactly.
Actually do it. This is we're very much at the sort of behind the scenes level in all of this. This is not how it would look to our our users, who are probably terrified when they see things like JSON that they will never need to.
Right. Exactly.
Should we do a test? Like, should we get a couple vendors and then show them the server and then have them send some of their output to the server, and they could show us what it looks like in their application?
That'd be great. I mean, if you've got people who are willing to do that, I mean,
we'll be planning to do that sort of thing in the Connectathon, I think, right?
that's true.
Yeah, and maybe we could do it in advance. So we
Sure.
started, a few of us started having a chat, just informal chats with a couple of the vendors. I think it was 3 of them so far. So, I mean, we're not picking any winners or losers here. We're not making any recommendations about, which vendors to use, but I mean, if everyone's okay with it, maybe we could pick a 2 or 3 or a handful of vendors that are really keen and kind of front runners, and then have them do some demos for us.
Yeah, that makes
That'd
a lot
be
of
great.
sense. Yeah,
it'd be great. I mean, that'll really discover some of the gaps in our thinking as well. I'm pretty sure, because we're making assumptions. I mean, I'm not that an expert on this domain like some of you guys, but I bet as soon as we give it to a real use case, we'll find a few things that don't fit. I mean, that's absolutely guaranteed. So it'd be good to get those bugs and features, done really. So all that's left now is for discussion. I mean, we've got a QA session and we've got a conclusion session, but really it's just kind of us guys talking. I haven't really got any conclusions for the group other than, I think this is relatively easy to understand. There's a lot to learn, but FHIR is as easy as it's likely to get in this space. So I'd be interested to hear anybody's comments from the group about what worked. Does this make sense? Is the meeting useful? Should we do it again? I'd like to hear from any of you guys. Maybe technical people are unmute, Aidan. Yeah, maybe technical people are not the most chatty people. But Aidan, let's see. Can you unmute it? Oh, maybe you can't. Maybe I have to unmute you.
Hello.
Right. Hey there.
I think this is really useful to be able to see the process. I have to say that internally at Roche, what people keep asking me is when I'll be able to show them something where we can apply our real data into these kind of scenarios. And I was saying that the scenarios themselves right now are very manual, but as time goes on, and especially now with that idea that vendors will provide some supporting tools, hopefully, that then gradually it can be shown. But for me, a key development will be for sure when we get to the point that we can try to use these resources, but with our own data, because then we can show people what it looks like. Right now, we have our processes obviously to put the CMC data into content output. But if we could show this same even organizations data, for instance, if we could show that with our real organizations, then it just illustrates it in a much clearer way to people what we really mean.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's kind of hard for us on this side to sort of do that for you. It's almost like we've made the recipe. Now you guys have to kind of, maybe not you guys, but your suppliers or your internal software teams or somebody has to now kind of bake the cake sort of thing. We're doing it by hand, but as we said already, there's a database out there with context information in it. There's a database out there with tests in it, probably. If they're still coming in on paper, then we've got a problem. But we've kind of given the recipe. Now, it'd be great when people are really getting the real data in. That's where it's totally where we want to be. Yeah,
but can I just say on that, the reason why I can't put in real data is obviously I could put in real data with the current mechanisms, even though they're not ideal, but because this isn't a secure Roche proprietary server, I can't do it for, you know, security and
Oh, right.
confidentiality
Yeah.
reasons. So
Of course.
what we ideally would like to have would be a kind of secured environment for, I'm sure all the other sponsors have the same thing, but just a kind of zoned off area where, you know, then our people say in IT security or whatever other legal, those functions will say, yeah, it's okay to transmit data to there. But with these current FHIR servers, I can't go transmitting our real data, obviously.
No, standard problem though. You could same with all FHIR data, you know, patient data. But I mean, yeah, obviously having an in-house server, you know, you can, these are free open source servers, so you can stand up a FHIR server exactly like this one. It's completely open source. Your IT team could get one going in a couple of days. You know, maybe with a bit of help, but it's not difficult to stand it up. You could do the same thing internally very easily. And then obviously the alternative is then having some sort of test data. You know, I know that's not easy to handcraft realistic test data, but you know, we have patient databases made of fictitious patient and things, so you'd have to have kind of fictitious products, and that's a bit of a headache, but that's probably what you need when it comes to public events, I suppose.
Okay, thanks. Can I just say on that, because you made me think of something that might be helpful for other people as well now. Actually, in the company, we have we've got a chapter that's devoted to FHIR interoperability, because there's loads of other areas obviously that use FHIR standards. They have existing FHIR servers that are already, you know, in production for other purposes. So I'll ask them, but I wanted to mention that as maybe it's the same thing, except, you know, is valid in other sponsors, that there are other groups that are already using FHIR that might be able to provide a resource to use for this purpose.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, maybe there's already a
makes
FHIR
sense.
server running, or it can be copied and stood up for your department. That'd be great.
And actually, to that point, when I mentioned we're started to meet with some of the software developers, so we have a couple meetings with structured authoring, content authoring companies that would kind of help author some of these documents. But we had intended to actually talk to some software developers that operate upstream and that support LIMS and, you know, the other FarmSci, you know, activities. So if you all can do that within your companies, if you know, figure out who you're dealing with, and if you could talk to them about this and kind of spread the word, because we'd love to get feedback. So it's all well and good that we get feedback from all of us and, you know, kind of on the pharma side, but we definitely want to get feedback from the software developers, because of course they're going to be the ones on the front lines implementing this. So the more feedback we can get from them on how to make this, you know, harden this standard and make it as robust as possible, the better.
Indeed, good stuff. So yeah, this is still our chance to, if anybody else wants to chip in, I'm happy to hear.
Hey Rick, it's Caroline Hellawell here. I just wanted to thank you very much indeed. It's been a really helpful session. I think particularly just thinking through the relationships between the different types of resources, and you've obviously started off with the definitions and the tests, which are and how we would be communicating them separately. In particular, can I just say a big thank you for pointing out the thing about the ingredients and the relationship with medicinal product being two-way, because I had not really got my head around that, and I got a much better understanding of how we would use that relationship now.
Okay, good.
So
That's good to hear. Yeah.
thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Well, my pleasure. Yeah, great stuff. Okay, that's nice to hear. So I guess I mean, people are welcome to chip in again, but otherwise, you know, if that's done, we can get a little bit of time back. So I mean, thank you from me. I don't know if anybody else on the Accumulus side wants to say anything.
Yeah, just to note
Go
that
ahead.
tomorrow we're having
Yeah.
is more of a business focus session. So, I mean, you're all welcome to attend that too, but it's going to be more focused on the content side. So some of those models that Rick was showing about how the resources all connect together, getting into the CMC content, and making sure that on the content side of things, we've checked all the boxes. So that's going to be tomorrow's event. So if you're interested, you can attend. If not, it'll be definitely CMC focused and not so much technical. So
Yeah, the last comment about the relationship between the active ingredients and other components, that's should be in the tomorrow's discussion, which we look forward to.
yes, we'll go through a lot of those models, like just like the models that Rick showed, and that will a pretty big focus of that will be the relationships between everything.
Okay. So yeah, certainly see some of you tomorrow. That'd be great, and some of your colleagues as well. So I'll say thanks for listening. Thanks to everybody involved for putting this on, on both sides. You know, on the attendees and the organisers side. That's been great. Rita's in the frame for questions, I believe. So your email there, Rita, for you know, how do I get my data on the server? If you know, about this sort of workshop, you can ask questions, and she'll feed back to us for on the technical side of things.
Yeah.
Okay, so other than that, I'll say thanks and goodbye, and see you again sometime soon.
Yes, thanks everybody.
Bye.
Very much.
Thank you.